Okay, we're live. Hello, welcome back everyone to another episode of This is Learning. Today we're going to be talking about code review, best practices. For anyone that doesn't know what code reviewing is, it's where you read somebody else's code and review it and then provide feedback. I'm sure we'll talk about this, but hopefully constructive feedback. I'm sure, Matt, you have seen some examples of less than constructive feedback. So we'll get into that a little bit as well. But our guest today, Matt Van Italy. I don't know much about you. I know you're the end all be all when it comes to code reviewing, and we should all just take your word as gospel. So why don't you let us know why that's true or why I'm lying?
Jay, thank you so much for having me. I am definitely not the end all be all about code reviews, but I do think and thanks to my colleagues, I do think we have at least a little something to say. So I'm Matt Van Italy, as you said. I grew up upstate New York. I'm the son of two coders who taught me to code when I was a very young man. But then I worked on the organizational side of technology for many years, including helping school districts and governments use technology to help improve outcomes for citizens and students. I really fell in love with code quality and helping developers improve their skill. I would really say the craft of coding from my time working in tech. On one hand, low code quality was really hurting our users, as you've all seen along the way and many experiences with it. And it was also not great for engineers to have low code quality, of course, because it's working with a messy code base or a giant refactoring is just super unpleasant.
Horrible.
Horrible. So horrible. And so we set out to build a company. So I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Sema, and we build code quality tools. And the particular reason I know a bit about code reviews is we really decided to try to help that in the code review moment, because we think it's such a special opportunity for the reasons we're about to discuss to improve the code, to improve the craft, to help people improve their skills.
Great. Cool. Well, I'm excited to learn more about Sema and your experience with figuring out what is, good code quality, what is good practices around code reviewing, stuff like that. But before we get into that, let's just explain, like you talked about a little bit, like why does code review, why is it important for us to do code review? Let's say there's we'll take my team, for example. There's 5 of us that write code on the team. We're relatively small, right? So it's not like we have, hundreds of developers all merging code into our master branch or main branch, right? Mm-hmm. So why is it important for teams of any sizes to do code reviews?
Sure. At the risk of being a little bit provocative, I do think the answer is it varies based on the stage of the product and the stage of the company. Let's abstract it a moment. The idea of a code review is a human being looking over the code, at least one human being looking over the code that another human being wrote. And that can be as formal as a big process where there have to be 3 named reviewers before something can merge to production. And it can be as simple as, for any of us who are still working in the same place, having someone look over your shoulder, hey, could you take a look at this and tell me what you think? The smaller the team, the more informal it should be, absolutely. And at the most extreme end, you're doing a code, a hackathon. You probably shouldn't do code reviews because the goal is not code quality. The goal is just to put something out. And one of Sema's values, or actually 2 of Sema's values, is that basically anything you can do, you can think about it in a trade-off of excellence and scrappiness, where excellence is about quality and scrappiness is about a trade-off of quality and speed. We absolutely think that's the right way to think about code quality and including code reviews. There's always going to be a trade-off. If you made code perfect, you'd never ship anything. And so how imperfect, how much technical debt you're taking on, how robust or simple are your code reviews will really vary. Your teams, obviously I don't know the details, but 5 of you, if you've worked together for many years and you're familiar with each other's habits, it's almost certain that just informal checking over someone's shoulder will be enough, because you're going to get the feedback back either on its maintainability or its a user functionality feedback from the users. So at a company, a team of this size and scale, code review can be pretty informal, maybe saved in particular for the trickiest areas of the code.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that rings really true on lots of points. Like, our code reviews are informal. There's lots of GIFs sometimes,
Very good. Very good.
Yeah. We share, that, you know how Staples, do you guys have Staples down there? Like a department store, like that sells like office stuff?
Not only that, but also we have those metal clips. So we have both Staples.
Okay, you have both. Okay, great. Perfect. Well, the former, not the latter. They have like that big red button.
The easy button.
Press it. Yep. Yeah, the easy button. So like I found a photo that says ship it, and we just paste that photo into the GitHub code review. Ship it, good. Anyway, back to actual code reviewing. The one thing that I like about our team with code reviews is that a lot of us are learning. We're all at the same level of skill, experience, learning. So it's not so much like I'm a senior and you're a junior and I'm reviewing your code and I'm saying that's the wrong way to do it. It's more of a discussion. It's like, I don't know. What do you think? Like, this seems maybe wrong, but maybe you did it the right way, but I'm unsure. So let's have a conversation about it. And then we'll like kind of bring other team members into it. And I think that is very true for any team, regardless of if it is like a senior engineer and a junior engineer, right? Like, you shouldn't be saying, no, that's wrong. Do this instead, right? Because that's the not constructive type stuff, right? And then the one point about the the scrappiness versus the technical debt, or scrappiness versus quality kind of thing. One thing I always tell my team, because engineers love to like do things right and do things well and like just like build the system kind of thing, right? I'm like, it doesn't matter if we build the system right if there's no company around to use the system. So like, I'm not advocating for cutting corners, but we need to consider, how deep we're going to go into this, because we do need to ship something at some point so that the company can make money, so the company stays around, right?
And that is the fundamental tension, most fundamental tension of the craft that we're in. And it is, I say it's a craft. It's not a competition. It's not like sales. It's not like working on an assembly line. You want to build it the right way. And that's so fundamental to the work of being a great engineer. It's incredibly powerful. It's what leads people to code on their own when they're not getting paid for it. But the flip side is the reason that coding can be such a lucrative profession and not a hobby is that it has to translate into commercial outcomes. And frequently, definitely not always, but frequently, you can get to a commercial outcome that is sufficient with a lot of technical debt. And I couldn't say it better. Than you, which is, doesn't matter how good the code is if you're an early stage startup or working on a new product. If users aren't using it, it doesn't matter. And so managing that tension and balancing it, I think, is critically important. There is no way around it, but you have to talk about it. And so making it okay, psychological safety is important in general, but also especially in code quality, is to be able to have a frank conversation. You know what? I'd really like to do this better, but I understand that we're not at that point in our company's history or our code base's history. So I agree. I'm going to be dissatisfied, but you acknowledge my dissatisfaction, and we'll come back to it another time. Obviously, keeping track of all your technical debt, and when possible, knocking it off, paying down some of that debt is a good idea. But yeah, you have to. This is the pro and con. It's an incredible career, an absolute incredible career. You can work from anywhere, incredible opportunities, but that comes with an obligation to think about the commercial outcomes, because that's what makes it possible to have this amazing career path.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, and maybe this might be controversial for some people as well, but try and do it well, because you probably don't have the luxury of doing it right. Right? Because doing it right is probably going to, and like again, very situational, very dependent on your current, environment, maturity, et cetera, et cetera. But doing it right typically takes longer. And like the last 20% takes 80% of the time. Right? That classic saying where it's like, yeah, you might rip through the project, but then like getting it to that last little bit is going to be a huge task. And like you have to ask yourself, is that huge task worth it? Right? Is that payoff worth it? So bringing this back to code reviews, right? It's like, make sure you're checking to make sure people are, when you're reviewing code, they're doing it well. And if they're doing it right, awesome. But then you need to determine if they should go to change to do it right, or if well is good enough, right? It's so difficult in practice, though, for sure.
Exactly right. And I think teams in code reviews and otherwise, just getting in the habit of asking each other just how which one is the lower standard?
Well, we do it well, yeah, because we can't do it right all the time.
Got it. Just how well or just how good does it need to be in this moment? And by the way, it can vary by pull requests, by feature, by not just on code. How good does it need to be right now? And just getting good and asking those trade-off questions and being curious about it, I think it's a muscle. It's a muscle that the team works on, of learning to make those kinds of trade-offs.
Yeah. Informed decisions, right? Around what do we get done so we can move on to the next thing. Yeah. So, okay. So now that we've kind of discussed how like the work it takes to do a code review, how far we go in it, how do you explain that to a non-technical leader? Like like I'm the CTO and co-founder of my company, right? I have my other co-founder is the CEO. He has been around tech for a while. He gets tech, but he's not a technology person. Like he's not a programmer. He's not an engineer. How would you go about explaining? And like this goes for anybody that's non-technical, right? It could be a senior manager in a department or whatever it might be, right? A CFO or something.
Sure.
How do you explain and justify code reviews?
Sure.
Right.
So I'd make three arguments to a non-technical audience about code reviews in particular and code quality in general. First, if you're certainly medium or large size organization, you will lose developers if you do not care enough about code quality that they have a good experience. I was a financial modeler back in the day, so I would take Excel documents that might have 1,000 variables across 10 different sheets. And when I try to explain code quality to bankers, I say, imagine someone handed you a model. They quit. They handed you the model with 1,000 variables and 10 sheets, and you weren't allowed to throw it out. You had to somehow figure out the logic, and they hadn't documented it. Bad code is a million freaking times worse than that. It's so unpleasant to try to figure it out. It's not creative. It's just unpleasant. And so if you're a software company who cares about engineering retention, which I hope is everyone at this point, if you're not doing all of the things, including a great, like a clean work environment, you're absolutely going to have retention problems. So that's reason one. Reason two, code quality, but also code reviews in particular, are a great way to ramp up new developers faster. So you get productivity from the folks you're bringing on. If you do it right, a medium to senior skilled, intermediate to expert engineer can be productive certainly from week 2. And if you don't do it right, that person might take till month 3 or month 6. That's extremely expensive. An extremely expensive gap. Code reviews, because they're just feedback and mentorship and hands-on guidance, it's just a way to close that gap. It's a particularly good way to do it. Mm-hmm. And then the third reason after ramp up is code quality, and code reviews in particular improve velocity. And especially, we talk about code as a craft, not a competition. many folks like CFOs and non-technical CEOs think of it like a competition. Like, okay, oh my God, now we just got to write faster. We got to build code faster. I'll get you 9 women for 1 month, and then we'll have a baby. Shout out to the Mythical Man Month. If you haven't read it, you should totally read it. Coding doesn't work like that. The way that you get to better velocity is removing blockers. It is getting things out of the way for engineers to focus, to be in their flow state, get rid of meetings, get rid of things that are not necessary. It is not telling people to go faster. And it's natural, right? Especially in these commercial contexts where people just want the releases to happen. There's commercial implications of how fast code gets out, but it's not the right way to get the best from your team. The right way is to make it as easy as possible for them to do their best work. Code reviews leading to more mentorship and skill diffusion and domain expertise diffusion is a much better method than almost any other way to help your team go faster.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that makes perfect sense, right? You just gotta, what I found is you gotta wrap, and this, you mentioned this, you touched on this a little bit, is you gotta wrap it back to the long-term impact, the long-term positive impact, where like, I realize that you might not think, one developer reading another developer's code is going to make us go faster, but it will make us go faster. So that's why we're doing it, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. So to make sure you're using that time efficiently, by that time I mean the one developer reading another developer's code, what are the strategies for giving good code reviews? And then on the flip side of that, receiving good code reviews, right, from both perspectives.
Sure. So let's talk about giving code reviews first. First for me always is remember you're giving a review to a person. We can forget that sometimes, maybe not in small teams, but certainly in large teams when everyone's working from everywhere. If you were talking to a human being, you would be kind, you would be clear, you would be specific. Related, you would never say, just fix this. What the heck does that mean, right? You always, if you're going to say something constructive, you have to give guidance and some specificity so they know where to go after. Mm-hmm. Third, and you really touched on this already, Jay, is about assuming good intent. And I like to say leading with curiosity. Mm-hmm. Whether you're a senior reviewing a junior or 2 mids reviewing each other, just being curious first before saying fix, asking why. Help me understand why you made this choice compared to this other choice. Now, if you really know the answer, I don't like playing guess what I'm thinking. So if you really think it needs to be fixed, be clear, say that. But in most situations, you might wonder why that person made that choice, and maybe you're both going to learn something from it. Fourth is about being really clear on what do you want the person to do and how important is it. And my favorite sub-example is a knit. By definition, to my mind, a knit is a small thing that could be changed that isn't important enough. Your team needs to develop a vocabulary that's consistent about a small change, that defining that term as distinct from a change that I really do think you need to make before it goes to production. I studied a lot of logic. It seems to me calling it a knit should be the thing that you don't actually need to change. So if someone calls out knit, you just don't change it. You acknowledge it. Maybe you fix it in the future, but not now. Whereas fix should mean, you actually, however big or small it is actually worth fixing. And the last part of code reviews, and I am such a broken record on this, it's true about feedback in general, it includes praise. It's not just about saying how something could be better. It is recognizing people for good or great work. And the trick here, so if, Jay, you were going to give me feedback on something I was doing wrong, you probably would be specifically constructive. Matt, I observe you only have 2 plants in your background. I think you would be more persuasive if you had 4 plants in your background. You wouldn't say you have a terrible sense of style and design. That's a general negative feedback, and it's a lot harder to handle. And we've trained ourselves that negative feedback should be specific. We actually should apply that same level of specificity to the positive side, because it's way more believable. It's easy to give out positive praise, even when you mean it. Oh, you've done such a great job. You're so thoughtful, blah, blah, blah. No, go to this moment. Wow, this variable, I never would have thought of including it this way. This is going to save us 5 hours down the road. So don't just say looks good. I mean, sometimes you have to do that. But when you can, when something's really worth sharing, point out that it's great and why it's great, because that makes it a lot easier for the person to really feel it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. That's probably something that I could be better at in regards to the specificity part of it, right? Like, I try to be curious as much as possible. One of the best things that my dad's ever taught me is, everybody has something to learn from someone, right? It doesn't matter who you are in the world. It doesn't matter how high up you are in the world. Everybody has something to learn, right? So that's why I never directly assume that what I'm thinking about is going to be correct over what I'm reading on a code review, right? It's like, maybe there's a reason they did that, because I didn't write this PR. Maybe they tried it my way and it didn't work and they went with this, but I don't know. So let's, figure out and ask. So I'm really good. I feel like I'm really good at that part, but I'm less so at the specificity part. I try to give praise and all that kind of stuff, but like you said, it's really easy to be like, good job, did it great, way to go, kind of thing, right? So
yeah, and I think
that's something that,
I definitely wouldn't do it all the time because it's exhausting and slows down velocity, etc. But maybe even if you're not adding it to the code review, although that would be better, just keeping, whatever note-taking system you have. I usually do paper. Just each person I'm working with every week, can I fill out one specific thing they did that I really liked, and pointing out one thing, and each week trying to fill it with a specific comment. You did awesome this week, even if true, doesn't count. The speed that you turned around those 2 pull request reviews on Tuesday really helped me stay in my flow. What you want to do is just as easy as possible, a simple tool or system as possible to make it likely that you do it, and just trying to integrate a little into to weekly practice can go a long way.
Totally, yeah. I actually might start doing that.
Cool.
Start writing down the little things just to keep track, because I have a hard time keeping track of everything that happens in a week. It's like by the end of the week, I'm like, yep, there was 5 working days before this, and I'm sure some things happened, but I don't remember them. So
totally. And it is always easier to read than to remember. And that's why I believe when an organization can afford it, in commenting code, in writing good documentation, in writing down positive feedback, and also constructive, and also just keeping a brag book for folks who are finishing university or might be going the job market or in a place that there are annual reviews, just setting aside time to remember what you did well every week, so that when you need to add to your resume or talk to your boss about it, you have the list to look from, and you're not trying to rely on what your memory for that. Totally.
That makes perfect sense. So wrapping this all together now, how does a team set up like a system for code reviews? And maybe this is where Sema comes in. I'm not sure. I'm sure we'll learn more about that here pretty quick. But what do we do?
So, not to be too philosophical, but it definitely matters to get psychological safety right. So, Some of you've seen the Google studies and others. Psychological safety is the #1 driver of a team success. Is it okay to share bad news? And leaders of the engineering team, leaders of the company, you have to role model that it is okay to get bad news and not freak out about it. Because if you don't, then no one's going to be honest, either in general or in their code reviews. So it absolutely starts with that. Second, a clear process. whatever it is, and it's going to vary by different levels of the organization size and stage, etc. But write it down and make sure it's enforced and have positive consequences for doing it and negative consequences if you don't. If it's a rule, you really do need to have everyone to follow it.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe in prioritizing code reviews. And so the way that we do it is actually more important than coding, because if you have a code review to do, someone else is blocked from doing their work. So the faster you can unblock somebody else, the faster everyone can get back to quote being productive. Of course, reviews themselves are productive, but we actually prioritize reviews over coding and recommend folks do something similar to that. Fourth, we talked about stages and just getting it right, and every 6 to 12 months reviewing if the code review is too robust or not robust enough for your stage. Fifth, clear standards. So if you have a set of rules, make sure they're really easy to find at the fingertips of the engineers, whether those rules are domain or coding standards or whatever. And six, I'm sneaking this in. We actually got a question. What about rules that can be that you could measure through code reviews, but also could be automated? Linters as an example. I love this question. Thank you, Lars.
Lars asked, yeah.
Thank you, Lars. Shout out to you for suggesting this. Actually, earlier in my career, I said automated rules and linters, don't worry about them into your company or to your teams, 50 or 100 engineers large, because it just didn't matter that much to improve the communication between engineers unless the team is large enough. I actually have now changed my mind, and I am a linter first kind of guy, even when your team is very small. And the reason for that is it reduces the cognitive load on the reviewers and on the writers from the beginning. It's just, obviously, coding is incredibly hard. There are so many different parts to keep in mind. Let's just take out a few of those things that we can, so we don't have to argue about them, so we don't even have to think about them. So I would automate, not have the engineering manager just assert. It should be a collaborative process and get to consensus on it. But I would absolutely automate any parts of the code review process you can.
So extending on that question then from Lars, if something can't be automated and you're continuing to talk about it over and over and over again in every single PR, of course this is going to be dependent on the case, but should we just ditch that check and just not spend time talking about it?
And yeah, a really good question. I'm going to answer it abstractly first. I hope this is okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I say, Jay, I think we should do A, and you say, Matt, no, we should do B, and I say, I've heard you on B, we should do C. Before you say D, stop. We've already talked about this a lot. Bring together every person who could be involved with this decision and talk about it synchronously, not asynchronously, because it's even worse if you're doing it over Slack or whatever. Literally, whatever the topic is, stop talking about it one-on-one, bring it together, and decide what we're going to do about it, because there are so many better things to spend your time on than a conversation you're having over and over again. So that includes a code review topic that's back and forth, but honestly, it's everything about a team, and especially with people working from everywhere, it's so easy to just hit send. You got to fight that, A, B, C, stop, and get a meeting so you're talking back and forth and get to an answer so you don't have to talk about it again.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've seen happen, not necessarily like within my team, sometimes, right? But just generally speaking, is people focus on things that in the grand scheme of things don't matter, right? And I'm not talking about, coding patterns or specifically how they define variables or anything like that. Just like things abstractly, just things in general. It's like so many people, like, I think it might just be, humans in general. We focus on things, but they don't really matter, right? Like they do, of course they do, but like, do they really, right? Like, would your time be better spent doing something else that, is advancing it all comes down, and this is a very utilitarian point of view towards this. I understand that. And there's definitely more to working with people than taking utilitarian point of views, but what's the ROI on this discussion, right? Is it worth it for us to have this discussion? If the answer is yes, then bring the people together. If it's no, move on and open your next pull request, right? Build your next feature, fix your next production bug.
Yeah, so. And I think as engineers move up their skill level from advanced beginner to intermediate to advanced expert, it's more and more about the judgment. Should we, not how do we fix this or how do we deal with it, but should we deal with it? Seniors, broadly speaking, you have an obligation to teach that judgment over time. And I'd say organization leaders have an obligation to do a really good job of explaining how these pieces fit together. I love the American president, John F. Kennedy, announced the space mission, and someone went to visit the NASA and asked a janitor, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm putting a man on the moon," because keeping a clean facility was essential for getting it up, right? And so keeping in mind, what are we aiming for? Is semicolons versus tabs going to make the difference of whether or not we achieve our goals, whatever they might be? No. So figure that out, stop arguing about it, and then work on things that advance the mission.
I think that's a really, really good point to end this on, because it covers the goal of code reviews very well. Like, code reviews are to make sure that the code you write is good to go to production, right? They're not to make sure that it's the best way to do it. They're not to make sure it's the most performant way to do it. It's not like they're not there for that reason. They're there to make sure that code can go into the product at the end of the day, because that is what we're doing here, right?
Very well said. Very well said.
Yeah. Well, a couple minutes over time, but that's fine, because I feel like there's some good information here. I mean, I learned some stuff from you, and it's nice to know that I maybe haven't been doing it completely wrong this whole time. So that's sweet. At least from the gospel of code reviews, anyway. But that being said, anything else that you want to share out before we end the stream, and point people to resources, websites?
Sure. So feel free to visit our website, semasoftware.com. We have some blog posts about code reviews and other materials you can read more deeply. And of course, we care about this, so we're trying to contribute. We have a free Chrome extension for GitHub that tries to help improve some of these elements of code reviews, making the point clearer, putting your library of best practices closer, having a dashboard so you can actually review the reviews and learn from them. If you're interested, you can sign up. Free is free, and feel free to drop me a line.
Awesome. Well, it was good having you on the show. I'm excited for you to come visit Kelowna.
I am too. It looks amazing. It's the Napa of Canada, people. I just learned it, and I am so going.
Wine country galore. All of the wineries. It's all we do is drink wine here. Awesome. Well, have a good Friday. Hope to speak to you soon. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm sure we have another one booked for next week. I don't see it, but we will tweet it out. Enjoy.
Jay, thanks for having me. Have a great weekend.
You as well, Matt.